late 1990s and early 2000s really was the golden era for gaming in my opinion. So many great games, some of which I have already reviewed on this channel, such as the two Zelda games that were made for the Nintendo 64. There was Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Metroid Prime, Pikmin, and Call of Duty, before it went overboard with all that futuristic stuff in recent times. And there are still many more games that came out in that period that I would like to review. Now, if some of you are long-time viewers on my channel, then you will know that I have a huge passion for Super Mario 64. I mean, I reviewed this game twice, for God's sakes. One of the reasons for that is because it's my all-time favourite game, and the reason for that is due to all the platforming elements. Sure, the previous 2D side-scroller editions of that franchise did a good job, but my personal favourite type of game is when you get to explore the worlds of these 3D environments. Something which was a pretty big thing back in the late 1990s, and some take this for granted with all this Skyrim crap that we get nowadays. Oh, how I miss the days when Nintendo were the best thing to happen since the Beatles, who apparently were the best thing to happen since Jesus. Anyway, with the arrival of the popular Nintendo 64 and the original PlayStation in the middle of the 90s, there was a new revolution. Nintendo had an even greater rival in Sony than it did in Sega earlier on in the decade, after the huge success of Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, look at how that turned out. Super Mario 64 came out when I was about 1 year old. The first game I remember playing was this game, and it blew my mind, and every time I see a YouTube video of it, I get reminded of the old days and how they were the best of times. Not many games do that. The only others I can think of are the two N64 Zeldas. There's the Wind Waker for the GameCube, and strangely enough, Donald Duck Quack Attack. But there is another game that I hold very closely to my heart, and it is on my all-time favourite games list, and it is Disney's
Magic.
No, I'm only messing with you. It would have been insane for me to even consider that a playable game, let alone a good game. Okay, let's try again. The other game that competes with the likes of Super Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and Donkey Kong 64 is Banjo-Kazooie. This game is a bee's knees, ladies and gentlemen. If you never played this as a child, then I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Seriously, if you haven't, you need this game in your life. It's just perfection. Of the games that I played all the time, I think I actually played this the most during my youthful years. I do wish that Nintendo would make games like this nowadays. Oh, but we've got Splatoon and Super Smash Bros. Wii U, which for some reason keep adding Fire Emblem characters to the roster instead of Zelda characters. And while I'm on the subject, I'm not even touched a Nintendo game for over a year now, and every time I do, it's a retro game from the era where Banjo-Kazooie comes from. It's such a shame, because once upon a time, Nintendo were the kings of games consoles. They revolutionised gaming with the original Super Mario Bros. 30 years ago. Everyone would have bought this game for Christmas back in 1985. Over a decade later, the same would have been said for the Nintendo 64 and the PS1. The beginning of 3D gaming, it was without doubt the heyday of platform gaming. Banjo-Kazooie exemplifies this genre probably best due to this genre being a collectathon. After all, the game was made by Rareware, a company who already made their mark on previous Nintendo consoles with games like Battletoads and the Donkey Kong Country trilogy. Some people hate collectathon games though. Well, that's what some people may be thinking. But in all honesty, as big as a game as this is, there actually is hardly any backtracking in this game. There's certainly exploration, which is something I love. I already had stated in the past how I loved this in Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask and Metroid Prime. They are just my type of games, and they're probably my favourite genre of video games as a whole. Banjo is kind of some sort of successor to Mario 64 in a way, because they have similar gameplay elements that the title characters share with the gameplay of Mario and Super Mario 64. For instance, some of the moves that the mole teaches you during your journey are somewhat reminiscent of Mario moves, such as the ground pound, etc. But Banjo-Kazooie expands on everything what Mario 64 got right, and in my opinion, this is just fantastic. The game has a bigger hub world, there are loads of characters, and the dialogue that you will witness quite a lot during this game is just damn funny. Younger gamers will absolutely love it. Well, I did anyway. I was brought up with Banjo. Back in the late 90s and 2000s, we didn't have these amiibos and all this crap that's being used in modern gaming. It was just pure platforming, and that for me was just pure bliss. There were no gimmicks like the amiibos back then, so why do we need this gimmick now? It's already enough of a gimmick that the last two Nintendo consoles have abandoned the traditional looking consoles for something like a TV remote and a tablet. Hopefully the upcoming console known right now simply as the NX will revert back to the traditional style controller. Thankfully Sony and Microsoft haven't fallen into this trap, and that is why they are delivering more gaming experience to gamers, and in my opinion have knocked Nintendo off their perch, which is really a shame because Nintendo have all the capabilities to outshine all the other companies by releasing games at a constant rate. They used to do this. Don't forget, Banjo-Kazooie came out the same year as Ocarina of Time, for Christ's sakes. That year was one of the greatest years in gaming history, and for a game that is about to turn 18 years old, it has aged very, very well. Hell, I'd go so far to say that the graphics in Banjo-Kazooie have aged considerably better than the original version of Ocarina of Time. Why can't we have classics like this now? Over the past 10 years, I struggle to even name a classic Nintendo game. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, we've got Twilight Princess. I love that. I suppose Wii Sports was revolutionary for a time, but I easily got bored, and I get more satisfaction from actually visiting my local gym. We had Metroid Prime 3, we had Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and probably the best two of the last decade released by Nintendo are Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. I did not enjoy Skyward Sword, and I'll explain that in a future video game review. After waiting years for Skyward Sword, I kind of lost hope in the big N, and I'm still waiting for a Metroid Prime 4, and this year's E3, we end up with an announcement with this shitty Federation Force, which is a multiplayer game. Even Zelda is starting to fall into this trap with the recent release of Triforce Heroes for the 3DS. And hey, I'm not saying that multiplayer games are a bad thing, but this is just getting boring now. I want something like Banjo. What's that? There's a new game coming out called Yooka-Laylee. No, scratch that. Just make a Banjo game. In the next E3 presentation from Nintendo in 2016, what I want them to do is I want them to do the following. I want them to announce Metroid Prime 4, cancel Federation Force because, let's face it, no one really gives a shit about that game. Everyone seems to hate it. Announce a new F-Zero because we've not had one of them for a long time. Gain full rights to Sega. Announce Pikmin 4. Announce Super Mario Galaxy 3. Announce the next console Zelda for the sake of it because, let's face it, they take 5 years to release anyway because there's so many bloody delays. Hell, the next Zelda is supposed to be released this year and it's been pushed back to 2016 despite Nintendo promising us, yes, it will be out in 2015. Yet we're near the end of this year and all we get is Triforce Heroes, which doesn't really appeal to me, to be honest. And the best thing that could ever happen would be for Nintendo to regain the rights to Rareware. Because, quite frankly, the acquisition of that company by Microsoft had been a complete balls up from day one. Rare were in their prime in the 1990s when they were working for Nintendo. Why, oh why, did Nintendo sell Rare to Microsoft? Oh, money. Well, it's all about the money. I bet we'll just end up with another bloody Mario game because Nintendo lacked the originality that they once had with games such as Banjo-Kazooie. Anyhow, it's about time that I stop ranting about how far the mighty have fallen and talk about how wonderful this game was back in 1998 and how it still is as we go into 2016. The story of the game goes that a bear and a bird live in a house together. A bear and a bird, that's quite bizarre, I know. And the bear is called Banjo and the bird is called Kazooie. They're named after musical instruments. Banjo's sister, Tootie, is playing outside the house, but little does she know that she's being watched by the wicked witch of this game, Gruntilda, who wants to have the same looks as Tootie because, quite frankly, Gruntilda is an ugly bitch. The witch captures Tootie with the help of the mole friends, Bottles. Banjo and Kazooie must rescue Tootie from the witch's lair, which is friggin' massive. You thought Peach's castle was big enough as a hub world with all the pictures that you jump into. This is even bigger, and it's one of the greatest hub worlds in video game history. As mentioned earlier, you have that same exploration and open world gameplay, something that a game like Grand Theft Auto 5 does really, really, really well. Okay, I'm going off topic again. Inside the lair, you enter all the different worlds in the game, and there is clearly a variety here. We have a pirate-themed one, an underwater one, which is actually done very well for once, because I'm one of those people who just cannot stand underwater levels. We have a swamp, we have a desert, we even have a bloody haunted mansion. Now, the music in this game is some of the best music ever made for a video game. Grant Kirkthorpe is a genius. Now, I mentioned this game being a collectathon. There are so many items that you need to collect in this game, which are pretty much vital to how the game plays. For instance, we have red feathers for Kazooie to fly. We have gold feathers to become invulnerable to enemies. We have blue eggs for shooting eggs out of Kazooie's mouth and even shitting them as well, which is quite odd. Moving on, we have musical notes which the player must collect in order to open doors in the lair in order to advance to the next stage. There are Jinjos which need to be rescued, and even are some honeycombs, which actually makes sense because they increase Banjo's life meter. Most importantly of all, we have the Jiggies, which you need to complete the jigsaw puzzles, which are scattered all throughout the lair, and once the puzzles are completed, you unlock a new world. Each world has 10 jiggies. There's a total of 100 of them in this entire game, so it should keep you busy for quite a while. And jiggies are just basically the power stars from Super Mario 64, but obviously they couldn't use the power stars because that would just lack originality. As I said earlier, back in this day, Nintendo, Rareware, they're all original. Now it's just repetitive nowadays. It's not as good how it used to be. One of the other best things about this game are the side characters. Now, we have Bottles the Mole, who gives you all these new moves to learn, which are essential to the overall gameplay. He helps you out through your journey to rescue Tooty from the witch. We have Mumbo Jumbo, who is a shaman who you collect tokens for. Now, after doing so, he will transform you into a random creature. These include a bumblebee, a baby crocodile, and a pumpkin. A pumpkin! How awesome is that? Now, after that description, you can tell that this is a massive game, and one which I feel is one of the greatest ever. Well, that's my opinion anyway. It's one of those masterpieces, and it's a clear standout in a period where I feel that Nintendo were quite possibly in their prime. We got a sequel to this game 2 years later in 2000. I won't comment on this moment in time about this game at the moment. I will save that for a future review. But for now, all I can say to all of you watching this is that I hope that you enjoy the rest of your holidays, and most importantly of all, I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas, and I hope that you all have a happy new year. Thank you very much for watching my video game review of Banjo-Kazooie. Quite easily one of the greatest games ever made.
Oh!